What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Champion Mindset, Finding the Way. I'm your host, Tommy Stiles. With me, Dom Cardone, and today we have a very special guest from Peak Performance Sports, all the way in Orlando, Florida, Georgia Miller. She is a certified mental performance coach. Georgia, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to our convo this morning.
Yeah, so Dom and I are very into mindset. That's what this podcast is kind of built around. I was telling you off air that we're both bodybuilders. He's retired. He actually still coaches me in bodybuilding, but we both work with a lot of bodybuilders and then lifestyle athletes as well. Some MMA, some college wrestlers, but for the bulk of it, it's bodybuilding. So first of all, kind of give our listeners a little background on what it is you do at Peak Performance.
Yeah, so my day to day, I'm mostly doing one-on-one work with athletes. So wide range, all sports, the popular ones, soccer, baseball, football, basketball, tennis, golf, and then some of the non-popular ones like badminton, pickleball, your random sports, some musicians I've worked with. So we also work with a lot of people in the performing arts world. So majority of my day consists of one-on-one meetings with athletes, working on different themes like confidence, fear of failure, perfectionism, mistake management, performance anxiety. And then I'm also working with a lot of teams, running team seminars, helping coaches implement these mental strategies and sports like concepts into their practices and teams. And then I work with a lot of sport parents also, especially for the younger athletes, and how to best help support their athlete at home because parents tend to put a lot of pressure on their athletes unknowingly. So working with whole family units, individual athletes from youth to the professional level, and then coaches and teams also.
Awesome. Interesting. So what got you into that? What drove you to that path?
Yeah, so I grew up an athlete. Volleyball was my sport. I played for a small D3 college and had the absolute best playing experience. I just loved it so much. And I thought I was mentally tough, but growing up or going to school for this and working with so many athletes, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had the knowledge I do now, I just can only imagine what kind of player I would have been. And I grew up in a Division I family, so watching my brother and play football, that was awesome. But I got to see the whole Division I aspect side of it and hanging out with those guys who were my age, but they were being ridiculed on TV. And just seeing that whole side of it, I'm like, they're just kids, and how that was impacting them and their mindset and their whole experience in sports, and seeing just how the social media influences athletes nowadays. That's crazy. Just way too many athletes are getting so lost in the stats and the outcomes and the critiques over media. And it's way too easy nowadays to get lost in that. So I'm really helping athletes ground back down in their purpose, rediscover what their process is, so they can ultimately perform better, but just find more enjoyment in their sport.
Interesting. You did mention social media, so that's its own topic and rabbit hole. So I'm curious, like if say you have a new inquiry or a new client that comes aboard, what is like the starting process for, working with athletes? It could be any sport.
Yeah. I'd say the first and most important thing is that I am building rapport with them. If we don't have a good relationship, then the coaching is just going to go out the window. They aren't going to trust me. I'm not going to get a whole lot from them. So that's the first thing that I really focus on, is building that relationship up. But for our first meeting, I do send them a couple of assessments to fill out. So I'll get a good idea of where their mindset is at, what some of their challenges are, and a good idea of what we really need to hit on going forward. But that first session, I tell them, like, listen, we're just getting to know each other right now. And then if we flow into some of the coaching and the sports psychology, that's great. But especially with the younger athletes, you gotta make sure that they're comfortable with you before they start opening up. And then some athletes, they'll meet with you and they'll just word vomit everything, and then you just kind of get right into it. So it's so dependent on the athlete, but that relationship that you're forming is the most important thing. And I'm sure you all can relate to that too, working with your clients.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that ties into a lot of what we do. It's especially being that I'm guessing you do a lot of it online too. It's not one-on-one in person.
Yeah, I'm lucky. I get all the in-person athletes here at Peak Performance Sports, which I love. But yes, most of my athletes, I would say, are virtual. And I don't really notice a difference in terms of the relationship that I'm forming, whether it's in person or on Zoom. Sometimes the connection can be greater with an athlete over Zoom, just depending on, who they are and how you connect. And then sometimes it can be a little less if it's in person. So I don't really notice a big difference there, but um, is it nice to see in person? You can kind of read their whole body language. Absolutely. And then another huge side of what I do, as well as other sports psychology consultants, is observing them in person, making sure you're going to practices and games if you can, seeing film, because a lot of our athletes are away. I know you all do a lot of virtual coaching too. So seeing them in person, watching their film, seeing how they're responding to different things in their competitions, that's really important. The body language gives you a lot of good messages to go off of.
Tommy, you have a question, or can I ask something?
Oh yeah, go ahead, buddy.
So I'm going to jump right into it, Georgia. Let's say I would love an example of somebody. Let's say they're watching films, or maybe you're seeing them in practice, right? Well, let's say you're watching a fighter. What is a good example of, let's say, I don't want to call it a flaw. Well, let's say it could be something that needs to be worked on. What are some body language cues that you see in an athlete, maybe watching film or seeing them at practice, that maybe stands out, like kind of like a red flag in your head? Like, okay, we need to work on X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. The emotional composure is huge, especially in MMA, right? You're going in knowing that you're going to get rocked pretty hard. Like it's going to be a good battle. And it's going to be really easy for you to lose some composure, get angry, get mad. And if you start being really chaotic in your movements, uncontrolled, that's a really good sign for me that, okay, hey, we need to work on that. Because if you can't control your emotions, if those are getting the best of you, and now you're acting a little chaotic in there, you're doing things you normally don't do, that's going to be a big challenge. You train to be controlled and concise and make smart decisions. And when your emotions get the best of you, it's hard to do that. So I'm looking for a lot of adverse reactions, even just the slightest things like an eye roll. If a baseball player strikes out, or a tennis player like slightly dragging the racket, or even just small things like just dipping your shoulders, or if they look really like internal in themselves versus like a volleyball player on the court just owning their space, right? So looking for a lot of cues like that, and verbal cues, sports where you do a lot of talking, right? Usually the first thing that I see in an athlete when they start making mistakes is their voice gets really shallow, or they just stop talking completely. In sports like MMA, right, you aren't really talking. So you got to look at for more of those, the body language within that. But it's funny because the talking, usually that's the first thing to shut down, but that's the thing that you need the most to get you out of your head. Because if you're talking about what you're seeing, you're reading what you're seeing, saying what you're seeing, there's no room for extra junk to get in here. So the more external you are, the better. And so when athletes tend to go internal, you'll see shifts in their body language. And so for MMA, you're looking for maybe just like the slightest things, like a little bit more inside of themselves, looking for their eyes, even just like how their mouth looks. Little cues like that can say a lot.
Wow. Okay. So I'm getting so many thoughts because I'm thinking of all these scenarios that you would be really useful in, especially with the fighters I see, but even for myself during training. You also mentioned like perfectionism. Let's say I'm training, right? And we're hitting pads, or we're doing some sort of combination or some sort of sequence, and I'm getting frustrated because with the gym I train at, there's world champions there. It's full of pros. So me as a former professional bodybuilder and working with guys on the top level, I go in there, I'm like, okay, in my head, I'm like, okay, I need to be here. But in reality, I'm not even there yet. I'm still working my way up through the beginning stages. What is something you tell somebody like me who's still working my way up that gets frustrated when I'm not getting those sequences down, or those combinations down, the body movements down as I wanted to, and I'm getting frustrated? Maybe I'm not being as graceful with myself through those stages.
Mm-hmm. Couple of things. I think we would really look at your expectations that you're having for yourself. So that's usually the first thing that I'm doing with an athlete. And kind of going back to your original question, Tommy, is like, kind of how do you start off? We're really looking at all of their irrational expectations. So if you're going into a fight thinking, I should, I don't know, I should dominate this first round. I shouldn't let them, no, I should never be in a knockout situation. Something like irrational like that. We're
That's
breaking that down. In a sport like baseball, I should never strike out. Okay, that's so irrational. You're going to strike out, right? So we really look at all those kind of I have tos and I shoulds that you have for yourself, and I shouldn't. All those like are trigger words for me. And so we're looking at those because if you don't meet that expectation that you kind of subconsciously have in your mind, then that leads to frustration. So we need to break down all those because those are very outcome focused and they can lead to a lot of judgment. So for like you, Dom, you're saying I'm in different stages here. So we need to set some more realistic goals within those stages where you can measure your success and how you're climbing that. And then also like, well, let's look at your view on mistakes. If you feel like you should be getting this sequence perfectly every time, or maybe after one practice you should be nailing it every time, well, that's not necessarily realistic. But how can we use those errors, those previous mistakes, as a knowledge going forward? How can you be productive with that mistake and go forward with it versus getting frustrated just because you didn't get it? And I think a lot of that too is what I'm working on with athletes are the types of questions that they're asking themselves. So if you get that sequence wrong and you're asking, why the heck did I just mess that up? Like I should be getting this. But you're kind of just sitting in that why, in that judgment for yourself versus asking, well, what now? The answer to what now is so much more productive. That actually gives you something to focus in on going forward. The answer to what now moves you forward. The answer to why leads to a lot of judgment usually.
I love that answer. That makes total sense. You broke that down piece by piece. That was great. Excellent.
Good, yay.
So essentially, it kind of sounds like because in any sport, failure is inevitable. Failure is how you grow, right? In practice, in games, you're finding what an individual athlete's fear is, and then you're attacking it and breaking it down so they understand it.
Yeah, the fear of failure is huge. I'd say that besides perfectionism, I'd say like 8 of 10 of our athletes are just major perfectionists. So working on that a lot, but the fear of failure, right? And usually kind of the route that I go with that is when you are so scared of something happening, you're afraid of not reaching your goals, that leads to you going into like avoidance mode or fighting safe mode or playing it safe mode is what I call it. So the more you fear something, the more you're going to be looking to avoid it versus just straight up competing. And so yeah, we're breaking down those fears, we're breaking down the worst case scenario. And usually when we're doing that, we're like really narrowing it down to worst case scenario. Are you going to be fine the next day if this happens? Then it's not as scary. But a lot of that is because their whole identity is wrapped up in being an athlete. And as we get older, right, you have more things to rely on. But as a 17-year-old, let's say, I mean, that's their whole identity is their sport. You know, you first day of school, you get asked, what's your fun fact? Like, oh, I'm a baseball player. Oh, I play football. Like, that's just who they are. And so for them, losing that championship game is the greatest defeat in their entire life, right? So it's really helping them see other identities that they have to fall back on. And in sports like MMA, usually those athletes are older. And so they might have significant others, they might have kids at home, which is honestly very helpful because if let's say they just lose a fight, they don't have a choice but to go home and change a diaper and be a dad, right? But for athletes who are younger, it might impact them a little bit differently. So we need to attack the fear, absolutely, Tommy, of like, okay, worst case scenario, you've been through this before, but instead of worrying about the outcome, what's your process that you can lead with? And then looking at their identity and other roles that they have to fall back on, that's huge.
Yeah, no, I think fear of failures, I mean, that's probably present in everybody's life in some component. So you're kind of exposing that and then attacking that and then helping them build a process to approach it, to grow through it.
Yeah. And Jim Harshaw Jr., he has a good podcast. It's Finding Success Through Failure. And he breaks failure down into two categories. So one failure is like you know you're learning from it. So let's say if I'm practicing cooking, I'm picking up a cooking habit. All right, I'm gonna try a new recipe, and if I don't like it, like, okay, I might tweak it for next time, or I might just throw it out the window, say I'm never doing that again. And that's a good failure. It's like trial and error, right? I'm growing from that. I'm getting better. I'm becoming a better cook. The other kind of failure is a huge threat to your identity. If I fail, then this is just not okay. So it's really helping them kind of shift it towards that first idea of failure is, how can I learn from this? How am I growing from this? How can I get better from this? It's kind of cliche, right? But that's really the only good way to handle mistakes. But like, you're going to get frustrated. If you fail, you're going to get frustrated through mistakes. It's a natural human emotion. I'm not telling my athletes to not get frustrated. But can we use that frustration to work for you? Like, how can we channel it into your fighting, make it controlled versus just losing all training and throwing that out the window?
Tommy,
Right.
I think that could even apply to, taking out the competition side of it. Athletes that, with when we give an athlete a nutrition plan, what would, so for instance, say if somebody is, not, I'm trying not to go too off topic. I just have so many questions. Let's say somebody's winning a lot. Let's say you have a champion athlete. I mean, they're winning a lot. I think we see a lot of times in sports where those athletes get so used to riding that high that eventually maybe their effort starts to fall back because they're so used, I guess we could call it comfort. They're so used to riding high. What are some mindset processes or thoughts that you can look for and instill in an athlete to say, no, listen, like, you're riding high, you're winning right now. You need to, how do you keep them on that path of winning? Well, hopefully winning, because, like, obviously failure is inevitable and everybody loses at some point, including champion athletes. What are some mental processes that you can instill in an athlete? Listen, like, we're winning. How do we keep that bar raising for them without them being comfortable? Like, listen, I'm going to, fall back in practice. I'm going to fall back in my cardio diet training, whatever it is. How can you keep them still going strong mentally?
Yeah. So a lot of what sports psychology is just figuring out what you're doing when you're doing well and what you're doing when you're not doing well. And there's a big stigma that you have to have a problem in order to come see a mental performance coach or a sport psychologist, when that's not the case at all. So in terms of that, like, someone who's winning a lot, like fight after fight after fight, they're just absolutely dominating right now. It's still really important that you have that reflection process. Is, what am I doing that is leading to all of this success, and how can I really come back to that every single time? So redefining what your process is, that's huge. I think that's a big question that I ask all my athletes is, what does it mean for you to be focused on the process? It's so cliche. We hear it all the time. Focus on the process, trust the process, but we're never truly breaking it down and defining what that means for us. And by a process, I mean, like, what are you doing before your fight? What is your routine that you're sticking with? What's your routine in between your rounds that you're sticking with? You got to have some sort of process, even for just that 1 minute there. Post fight routine, what are you doing there? So, and not, again, kind of not getting lost in all those outcomes of stats and what the judges are thinking and what my opponent's going to do, but what is your process? If it's like, okay, I'm going to read and react, find my breath, all of those small things, that's what you want to bring awareness to. So really breaking it down for them after those fights and like, okay, let's pull out all the little things that you were doing and how can we repeat that for next time? But, and also another side of that is, I work a lot with my athletes on anticipating and coping. It's so easy to feel confident when you're doing well and dominating all these fights. That's so easy, right? We can all do that. But it's a whole nother ordeal when you lose something and then you come in and you're feeling confident anymore. So that's why it's so important to have that process to come back to where you can instill confidence in that. Like, I am confident in my process. This works for me. I'm going to stick with that versus finding so much confidence in the outcome of your fight. And so what I mean by the anticipating and coping, like, okay, let's identify possible challenges for your next fight or for your next competition. What could go wrong? And then we're coming up with solid reactions and responses and good mindsets to be thinking about that challenge. That way they immediately know what to do if that challenge comes up. We're being very proactive with that, and we're preparing them for that. So those conversations are weaved in all the time in my work with my athletes.
So, and by the way, for the view, we have a lot of bodybuilding viewers because that's me and Tommy's main industry.
Yeah.
You know, I had a coach many years. He was one of my greatest mentors. His name was Oscar Arden. Tommy's heard this 1,000 times from me. He was very big in the mental side with his bodybuilders. They used to call him the bodybuilding alchemist. I mean, very big with the mental side of things. And he was very big into visualizing the result. Visualize you winning, writing it down in a journal, such and so forth. But one thing that you just said that Oscar never really prepared people for was possibly coping with the loss. And I would see some of his athletes, like he would instill this drive in them, like, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to win, I'm going to feel that trophy beforehand, I'm going to feel the trophy in my hand, I'm going to see myself going through the poses and the mandatories and the re-comparisons. Is it important, like you just said, to have, like, maybe I'm probably answering it for myself, those coping mechanisms, or possibly what he was like, failure can never be an option. Failure can never be in your head. But for me, thinking back, it's like, I mean, it worked for me when I was competing, don't get me wrong. But with a lot of people, like me, if I lost, which I did, I was like, okay, you know, well, I got upset for a minute. What's the next goal? But there's some people who, you know, I'm going to go into this show, I'm going to get my pro card, I'm going to win, whatever it is. But they don't do it. And they didn't anticipate or see failure as an option. And now they are like down here. So how would you kind of, again, I know it's very individual based on the athlete and the situation. So of course, generally speaking, how would you instill into that athlete, listen, no, we're going in there to win. We're going in there to do our best. But, you know, having that anticipation, that coping, how would you instill it into them or word it to them? Like, maybe I'm saying it wrong. That, you know, if you don't hit that, like, how do you instill into them, like, what if you don't? You know what I'm saying? So they don't ride on that going here and then they fall here and then it's just going to snowball into something much worse, if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes total sense. A lot of that is timing. So I start with a diver. This is a good example. I start with a diver tomorrow, and she competes in 2 weeks. She's a big mental block right now. She cannot do her 3-meter double flip dive. She just freezes up on the board, gets terrified. Okay, so for her, I'm going to be much more solution focused. I'm not really going to talk a whole lot about failure. We need solutions to get her going. If I'm working with someone long term, like if this is, let's say, 3 months before their bodybuilding competition, great time to work those conversations in. If they have a plan for when they do fail, if they don't necessarily get that goal, that's just going to make them feel more secure and better. They aren't going to be fearing that failure as much because they have a plan, right? But yeah, before their competition, I'm not going to be asking them, okay, what if you lose today? What are you going to do? Oh no, we're instilling all the good stuff in their head, making sure that they have that. So I think a lot of it is just depends on the timing of it. But if you're more prepared for what you're going to do and how you're going to think and how you're going to respond to that failure and use it as good experience and confidence going forward, again, you aren't going to be looking to avoid it as much. You're going to be going in there to lift weight and compete and go for your goals. You aren't going to be going in there looking to avoid making mistakes.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
The timing thing makes a lot of sense when I think about it from like what we do, Dom, of like, if I prepared for the thought of losing in the off season versus 2 weeks out, that's probably a much better place to where I could accept that and use it as fuel to get better. Whereas if I'm thinking about losing 2 weeks out, I've already lost. Like I shouldn't even show up. So we talked about expectations. So in our field, we deal with a lot of delusion. So because bodybuilding, you can earn professional status, a lot of people get into it. And because we'll talk about social media too. Social media glorifies turning pro in bodybuilding. Like it's this life-changing event that if you do a competition, you'll do a competition, and then you'll go to a pro qualifier, and then you'll turn pro, and it'll happen boom, boom, boom. And it kind of makes the process of what it takes to achieve that, it waters it down. Like it's not, there's not sacrifice, and it's not, because it's demanding what bodybuilding is. So how do you manage delusion? How do you manage expectations that might be setting athletes up for failure? Because Dom and I deal with this every week of someone new comes to us who's never done a show, but they're going to go pro. And they tell us that, like, they're going to go pro in X amount of time. And it's like, maybe you will, maybe you won't. But how do you manage someone who's coming to you with that type of, it's not that it's bad to be confident, but that's confidence that I've seen it 100 times. It's going to derail someone real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A couple of things. I think there's a lot of comparing going on there. So that's why social media can be so dangerous, is because as soon as you compare, like let's say they do their first show and they are just so proud of themselves. Oh my gosh, awesome. And then they're scrolling through and they see a friend or someone else in the field just earn first place in their like fifth show. And you're like, oh, all pride and joy that you just had for all your hard work just flew out the window because you decided to compare yourself. And it's so important to have people like you, like coaches like you all in their lives, to help bring them back down to set more realistic goals. Because if you're coming in and you don't really know what a realistic goal is in the field or know what it takes to get to that level, it's so easy to assume, because they see pictures of people and all these awards and winning, like, oh, I'm going to do that. But they don't see all the behind the scenes work. And so for you all, that's really important to help kind of ground them back down and help them set more realistic goals for their first show, for heck, even their first week, second week. Help them see what their markers of success need to be. You all are the pros there, and they don't know. So helping educate them on that is so important.
Yeah, that pretty much nails it. So kind of tapering off of that, as far as in bodybuilding, there's a lot of, and probably MMA, Dom, there's a lot of like, there might be past traumas that led someone to get into that. Do you tap into that and try to learn about that side of an athlete and to figure out how to use that to either work through something that they have going that's a block for them, or to help them use that trauma or use that to fuel them forward? Or does that kind of step out of the psychology realm into more like traditional counseling and therapy?
Yeah, I think it just depends. If there's something going on in their life that's impacting their performance in their sport, then that's when we'll really talk about it. Okay, and how is this directly impacting your performance right now, and how can we work around that? But if there's past trauma, then yes, sometimes getting into that is helpful, and even using it as a strength-based approach in a way going forward. So this was a big thing for you, a huge experience. What can we take away? What did you learn from this? Even if it's more so involved with their personality characteristics, that's still directly involved in bodybuilding and their sport and how they approach difficult situations. So what did you learn from this experience, and how can we use that going forward? What are the parallels from that really difficult time that you had to this difficult time that you have right now? And it's the little things with bodybuilding, right? Even just like with going up in weight and making sure you're getting all your reps for your sets in, right? If you decide to, oh, I'm gonna just not do this last rep because I just don't feel like it. Well, if you're cutting corners in one small area like that, you're probably cutting corners in other areas in your life. So yeah, I think using past is so great in our field for more of a strength-based approach going forward. How can we take that experience as confidence, and how did that shape kind of who you are in your decisions going forward? If I realize that it's out of my scope of practice, then I'll totally refer them out. Like, hey, I think you need to go see a specialist for this and really work through that and I'll still work with you on this side on the performance aspect of it, but that's not my realm. I can't help you specifically with that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Turning it into it sounds like the base of what you do is everything is being turned into a strength, right?
Yeah. My job is to empower them to take control and have all the confidence that they need going forward, to make decisions for themselves, to take a bad situation and say, okay, what did I learn from this? How does this make me better? What are tools I have to refocus in the moment, to stay emotionally composed? How can I find the awesome benefits of being a perfectionist and find the balance of that with the challenges of being a perfectionist? So building that awareness for them, giving them these tools in order to do that, help them feel more in control. That's what we're doing.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. It's always gets back to like getting back to the basics.
Yes.
I think it's easy.
Getting back to the basics.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Dom, do you have anything?
Yeah, I actually do.
Yeah,
I mean, it may be a very again another general question. Let's say, in bodybuilding world, there's a lot of people who do it that don't love it. They're posting social media that they're eating all their meals, or posting videos of them training, but behind the scenes, they're really not doing all those things. They're not eating all their meals. They're not training their absolute hardest. So there's and they are competing. What is your thought process or your thoughts on somebody who's involved in something like that that's really not all that into it? What would be yours? Let's say you're coaching somebody, right, and you identify something like this. I don't know if it's something you've ever. Me and Tommy deal with it quite a bit. It's extremely common in the fitness industry, especially with competitive bodybuilding, that it all seems great, but in the grand scheme of things, they really don't love it. And they're competing, they're not doing their best. What would be a conversational piece that maybe me and Tommy could have with those people that bring in the mental mindset part that we could have with them? Like, listen, like, they're not really doing it for the love of it. They're not doing it for anything other than, could be social media. Because, being a high performing athlete, you need to be ticking off all those boxes for the most part. The high performing athletes do tick off all those, but it's the basics, like Tommy even just said. What would be a conversation you would have with somebody like that? Like, listen, like, you're seeing they're not doing, you're trying to work on them. You're trying to instill some more confidence in them. You're trying to teach them to nail the basics down, and they're not, but they're just stuck in this hamster wheel, nonstop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that all comes down to what motivates them. And that's a great conversation for you all to have as coaches with them, is what's motivating you right now with this? And the love of it certainly could have started it, or desire to reach their goals. But those external motivators, like the social media, the awards, the recognition, all that is nice, but that's not long lasting.
Mm.
You need love to be involved to get you through those 5 a.m. workouts, to get you through all those meals. Maybe you really just want to eat a big fat piece of chocolate cake. But if love for that bodybuilding isn't there, it's going to be really hard to drive you through all of those hard workouts and shows in nutrition boundaries that you got to keep with it. So love is the most important thing that has to be involved. So ask simple questions like, hey, what's motivating you right now? And just getting them to really think about that. But, I think with athletes, sometimes it can be scary to admit to themselves that I don't love this anymore, and to transition out of their sport because they've been doing it for so long. And again, their whole identity is wrapped up in that. So that's why it's so important that you have other hobbies, you have other things to fall back on, and a good transition out of it. So it's a little less scary for you. But heck, I mean, you can transfer bodybuilding into a very healthy lifestyle, right? So helping them see that you don't have to compete to really do this. You can do it at like a less intense level. but helping them just discover what motivates them. If it's internally, like the love of it, it's fun, awesome. But if most of their motivators are those external things, that's not enough to sustain throughout a whole competition season. It's enough to maybe get you through a couple of weeks, but not enough to make it last.
Excellent, excellent. Because we see that all the time. I mean, it's very, very common. But to piggyback off what you just said, which is another great talking piece, is transitioning out of something you've been doing for so long. Either it be somebody who has not given it the role, but I'm sure, especially for somebody who has dedicated their whole life to it. Like, like I was saying, I totally retired from competitive bodybuilding last May, but I had something else to go into, which was, it started with jiu-jitsu and then went into MMA. Let's say somebody isn't prepared for that and they have an injury, they have a health issue that it happens all the time with athletes, not just bodybuilders, where they're left like, what do I do now? Let's say you have somebody and that happens and they're left like, I mean, my dad told me when he had a long talk with me when I was young, when I turned pro, he was listening. He's like, this is going to come to an end one day. And it can come when you plan it to, or it will come when you least expect it to. And you have to be prepared for that, because a lot of athletes then become involved in drugs or alcohol or something that's self-destructive, because they lose that identity, or what they thought was an identity of them. So I used to say bodybuilding was who I was. I learned that it wasn't healthy to think like that. And it shouldn't be who somebody is. Like, listen, you're Georgia, that's Tommy, I'm Dom. Like, who we are as a person and our core values and who we are on the inside is truly who we are. And either it be bodybuilding, basketball, football, whatever it was an extension of that, was a part of our life. But a lot of people don't realize that. So let's say you have an athlete and this happens and they're just they're going through a severe depression. They have no idea what to do with themselves. And we see that a lot with all sports. And they go through this and they're going to try to come back. And it usually never goes to plan when they try to make those comebacks. We see it in all sports, either it be combat sports, bodybuilding, and then they're left in a worse position than they were before. So let's say you have one of those athletes, Georgia, I tore my bicep, I'm done. I'm really depressed. I can't compete I will never be the same. What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
What would be the beginning steps to get their mind going into something else before it turns into something that could be self-destructive?
Yeah. Helping them see that all those awesome qualities that they had as an athlete, they're still there. Your hardworking, your dedication, your commitment, those are qualities about you that don't have to exist just in your sport. Those show up in all these other roles in your life. So how can we really identify those, bring those out, and shift them into something else? Like shift them into a business, shift them into some other sort of job, and making sure that you have a great support system around you. I think that's huge, right? Mentors, making sure that you have mentors, having just conversations with people who are going through similar transitions as you, huge. But it's so important to be proactive with that, like making sure that if you are, let's say in the NFL, average stint in the NFL is 3 years. Okay, what are you going to do after that, though? So making sure that you're having some conversations, even just an idea of what you might want to do outside of your sport is helpful. You don't have to have this whole well laid out plan, but even just the slightest idea is very helpful. So really getting them to see all their takeaways and lessons from their sport. I was doing this with a ballerina who was making it pro and she's starting to transition out. We wrote out this huge list of all the lessons and takeaways that she had from dance over the years. And it was awesome. We're like, oh my gosh, you have all of these great qualities that dance taught you. How can you shift those into something else? Now she's going back to school for it. She's found some new passions. And I think asking yourself, okay, what do I love to do? What am I passionate about? And how can I help others? Answers to those two questions are going to lead you to somewhere good. But the giving to others, the serving to others, that always makes you feel better. It takes the focus off of your mind and makes you feel like you're part of something that's a little bit bigger than yourself. And I think that's why it's hard sometimes too for athletes to transition, because they don't have that team, that community anymore. So finding that community somewhere else is really important, but starting small with those conversations, starting something new that you aren't really good at and using those awesome qualities that you had as an athlete to dive deep into that, that's really important.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's exactly what I did. And I was fortunate at the time to have somebody who was, 7-time Mr. guide me through that process. And like you just said, list through the pros and the cons of coming back. What am I good at? I also did have an idea of what I wanted to get into after.
Mm-hmm.
So you just like everything you said was like just dead on. But a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't hear these things because they see people go in and out of sports and they don't hear what. I remember watching an online seminar. She was a pro MMA fighter. She was very good. She's a very, very successful entrepreneur now. And, she made a comment that, there's two deaths in a professional athlete's life. It's when they actually die and when they leave their sport. But how they go about that and how they're reborn goes back to exactly what you said. So I love the point you just made because I can especially relate to that. It worked incredibly well for me.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like your dad was planting that seed at a young age for you also, right? Which is nice, and we're so blessed to have parents in our lives that do that. But a lot of athletes, unfortunately, don't. Like I said at the beginning, I'm working with a lot of parents because they're putting so much pressure on their child to win and do all these things, and they're pointing out all of their mistakes as soon as they come off the field, and that's not helping them in the slightest. They aren't loving them. They aren't being just a parent. They're trying to coach also, which is not their role. So that's kind of where coaches have the awesome ability to come in too, especially like mental performance coaches, is planting those seeds for them if they aren't getting it at home.
Excellent.
Interesting. So say we have like performance anxiety, because in bodybuilding you have your contest prep and then your show is say 16 weeks out. All the weeks building up to that, the urgency to do well mounts on you and it grows. So the final week is called peak week. Dom, the final week of MMA or combat is fight week. And I'm sure the same for other sports. You're getting ready for the big game or the big whatever state championship. You could apply it to anything. How do you deal with someone who lets the pressure of that kind of close their walls in and it causes anxiety in their performance, or they drop the ball?
Yeah, we need to attack that from two different areas, the cognitive side, but also the somatic side and how that's manifesting and showing up in your body. Usually it's like little butterflies, right? Or you're feeling really tense, maybe a little shaky. So the cognitive side of it is really breaking down what's your view on pressure. I think that's one of common questions that I ask my athletes who have performance anxiety. I work with a lot of pukers too. I'm sure there's some bodybuilders that do that. Puke before every competition, puke before every game because they're just so nervous, right? So what's your view on pressure? And then usually a lot of times it's bad. Pressure is a bad thing. So then, okay, we can't change the situation that you're in. So let's try to really change the perspective that you have on it. And making sure that you're locked in on all of those controllable things, your preparation, your plan, your routine, what exactly you're going to do, little tiny process goals like commit, anticipate, read, react, smile when you're on stage, like all those controllables that you can lead with, right? Versus all the negative what ifs. What if I do this? What if I do that? What if, this awesome or negative thing happens, and turning those into positive what if. So we got to break down their perspective on pressure. I like to do, I call it challenge or threat. This is a nice little exercise I do with my athletes. Is a threat is a bad thing. We don't like threats. We run away from threatening situations. Challenge, though, you're an athlete. You love competing. You love challenges. So if it's a threat, you're probably thinking things like, oh no, I have to win today. I can't lose. Those types of thoughts create a threat in your mind. But the more positive thoughts of, okay, I get the opportunity to do this. I get to show off all my hard work in front of all these people today and enjoy it. Then it's going to seem more like a challenge and opportunity for you to overcome. And for some athletes, and competitors, it's helpful for them to see where that originally came from. So I'm like, okay, back in caveman times, right? We needed that fight or flight response for survival. We needed that to run away from scary things. Nowadays, it shows up in different ways that aren't really necessary, like a presentation or something that involves money, competition. We don't necessarily need it that much. So getting them to see that, heck, my body's just getting me ready. And your body, it does this awesome thing for competitions. It starts shutting down different systems because it wants to get you ready for kind of that fight or flight mode to lift all that weight, right? So a lot of people get dry mouth, or like I mentioned, like butterflies, maybe they have to run to the bathroom because your digestive system is shutting down. Your body's like, I don't need to eat right now. I need to perform and I need to compete. So it's actually getting you ready. It's doing this really cool thing. So helping them interpret it as more so excitement versus nervousness is a great thing. And also giving them tools to release that in their body, like the breathing, the mindfulness, the progressive muscle relaxation. We got to pair those with it too, to really be able to release that tension that you're feeling in your body.
Okay. So habits and rituals. I think for every sport, you're going to be your habits and rituals, right? So how do you identify when, like, say, because we get a lot of people that want to do better on stage or place better or win, obviously, but they're not seeing that how they're training. You know, you practice how you play. So they're not seeing that their approach towards their training, both mentally and then physically, is what's probably causing them to not place as well as they want to. I mean, we can, what we do involves dieting and getting in contest shape. We can remove that component of it because that's different. But how do you break down that for someone when they have these aspirations or these grandiose expectations of doing well, but they're almost self-sabotaging themselves by not training hard enough or not doing what they need to do from a standpoint of like preparing to practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, I don't work a whole lot on big goal setting with my athletes. They have those visions in their head, right? What I'm more concerned about is what are those little things that you're doing every single day to get you to that big goal. And sometimes, you know, when you all mentioned earlier that you have some clients come to you and they have these huge aspirations and these big goals, but sometimes they might not be the most realistic. Sometimes it's a lot easier to forget about that big goal, especially mid competition, because thinking about that big goal isn't necessarily going to help you compete in the moment, right? So I'm not really working with them on huge long-term goals, unless that's something that they really need, right? But we're really breaking down the little things and the nutrition aspect of it. That's huge for bodybuilders. So I think there's an education piece there too. As coaches, we need to do a good job at educating them, getting them to see the importance of it. That way they're more bought into it. But a lot of it is just experience also, right? Their first bodybuilding show or competition, right? They aren't going to truly understand what all those little steps mean until they have their first experience with that. So the education piece is very important, and breaking it down into smaller, more manageable goals for them, the daily goals, the weekly goals, that's huge. That's what we want them to focus on, not necessarily that big overarching goal.
Yeah, I like that. Dom, do you have anything?
I have a lot of stuff, but it'll go on for quite a bit. I mean, that was a great piece. I'm good for now. I'm okay. I'm just following along now.
Yeah, no, I could keep asking questions all day. So as far as we've touched on social media a couple different times. So how do you handle like the big umbrella that social media is? It plays a role in every single facet of life, unless you just live on a ranch in Montana and choose not to partake in it. But it's definitely prevalent in the bodybuilding industry. It's prevalent in MMA. It's probably prevalent in high school sports in a way that it wasn't around when I was in high school playing sports. So it's probably created a whole new caveat to working with people. How do you handle both the positives that social media can bring an athlete and the negatives that it can bring an athlete?
What is your purpose for being on social media? Is it for entertainment? You just like to mindlessly scroll? Awesome. Is it to inform people? That's great too. Is it to gain attention? Okay, probably need to double check your purpose for being on social media then. What is your purpose for posting that selfie? And see what their answer is, right? If it's to gain gratification from other people, well, then you're probably going to be looking for that reassurance from external factors that aren't in your control. Like, how can you find that reassurance from within? It really shows, like, a person's profile can really show a lot about them. And making sure that you aren't just picking up your phone and mindlessly scrolling, asking yourself, why am I getting on Instagram right now? Okay, is it just to entertain myself for 5 minutes? Okay, great. But you got to know your purpose for being on there. And I think that's just one simple, easy question that I ask all my athletes. And for some, they can't handle it. The comparison is just too much for them. So we say, okay, let's get off social media for a month, see how you do, see how you start to feel. Let's really start finding that confidence from within until you think you're ready to get back on it. Or unfollow certain people. If you're overthinking when you see someone's post, then unfollow them or mute them. You have control to do that. So yeah, those are just some easy questions that bring up a lot of good conversation.
But just to interject, well, not interject, but many people, well, I mean, you'd be able to read it off them. So with what I'm about to say is, I think a lot of people today won't admit that they're looking for attention or gratification, or maybe they don't realize it. I think a lot of people do it, and if you ask them, why you doing it? Oh, I just liked how the picture looked. When in reality, like you said, if you look at their profile and stuff they're posting, you can gather from it that they're seeking some external gratification and attention. I mean, let's be, especially in our industry, there's a lot of people who do that. What would you do in a situation where somebody's not, admitting that, or maybe they don't realize it, that they are seeking that external gratification, but they're saying, I just like the picture, or but yet there's 1,000 of those pictures, and it's clear what they're doing. What would your response be to that if somebody's not admitting to, that they are looking for those things?
Helping them see other perspectives, putting them in other people's shoes. Like, okay, if you're outsider looking in, how would you be thinking about this? But honestly, just continuing to love them, support them, be that go-to person for them, because eventually they might come around and see, but a lot of times they aren't ready to open up like that, and that's okay. You have to respect that. But even just planting those little thinking seeds in their head, you have no idea how big of an impact that's making on them. So I would say I have a lot of athletes who are like, oh, well, that didn't help me. That didn't help me. I'm like, okay, like, let's work it. Let's try something new. Let's try to reword that differently. But I'm constantly still being that source of support for them. I'm constantly loving on them, giving them that positive reinforcement if that's there, right? But also challenging them with the questions that other people aren't asking them. They know I'm always going to be there for them, but they also know that I'm going to ask them the hard things that a lot of other people aren't going to be asking them. So just honestly providing that continuous support for them. I think that's the best way to go, because you can lead a horse to water, right? As the saying goes.
Can't force it to drink.
Yeah.
Is there ever a point working with people that you have to, because it sounds like the basis of how you work is very support driven and maybe leaning towards empathy, towards understanding someone's situation and then driving home a process to untangle it or, help them strengthen it. Is there a point, and I'm also, did you have any coaches that did this where you have to like crack the whip and kind of put someone's problem in front of them, not necessarily in an aggressive way, you don't have to be like a dick, but at the same time, like, kind of take charge of the situation? Because I deal with people who will just continuously make the same excuse over and over and over, no matter how many times you've put it in front of them and shown them that this is what we need to circumvent and work through to move forward or climb higher. So how do you handle that if that situation arises?
Mm-hmm. when you are doing this, how, or a good question that I like to ask is, when you are being outcome focused, how does that make you feel? When you are consistently doing this habit, what is that leading you to do? Getting them to really see the impact that it's having on themselves and their results, their outcomes, their process, their feelings, their emotions. Getting them to come to that conclusion themselves is the most important thing. So I'm asking a lot of guiding questions for them to do that. It's going to be so much more meaningful if they can come to that conclusion themselves versus me just telling them, this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you should think instead. A lot of people aren't going to be very receptive to that. Now, if I have a good relationship with my athlete and they're asking me like, Georgia, like, what do I do here? Like, okay, they obviously want me to give them something and I will give them that. But I think that relationship between coach and client, that needs to be there first and foremost. But helping them come to that conclusion themselves, that's where it's going to have the most impact. And if they don't come to that conclusion, if it's going to take some longer time, it's going to take some longer time. Some of your best clients might just be these awesome open-minded learners, and they're like, please give me all this feedback and advice, and they're implementing it, they're trying it, they want to learn. Those are the best athletes, best clients to work with, right? They're committed, they want to improve. The hard ones are the ones that are very stuck in their ways. So again, it's a commitment on your end and checking yourself before every session that you're going in with them that, okay, I am this outside perspective. I need to leave all of my personal feelings and beliefs off the table right now and just be there for this person. Because a lot of times it's really easy, especially for a mental performance coach, for your own beliefs and values to get into the way of your work with them. Like, I don't agree that you did that, but I can't bring my beliefs into that. I need to be this objective kind of person for them.
Yeah, that's valuable to hear, because I think I'm probably guilty of allowing my thoughts and how I would handle things to kind of shape my coaching sometimes. And I could probably work on that as far as I know. Yeah, I know you're raising your hand. Like you're actually helping me right now understand some of the areas I can improve as a coach. So that's very valuable.
Yeah, and you're obviously, like, your personalities, don't lose that. Let's not be robots, right? But I think for some athletes though, we just need to be creative in our delivery.
Yeah, that's like, I mean, individual drives the process rather than like a blanket sheet protocol, right? So that's valuable to hear, because I mean, there's a lot of areas I'm thinking of that I could probably improve on as far as my delivery, because sometimes I do take that like stern, direct, this is how it is, do it this way approach, and I could open up and do things differently there.
Yeah, and I also like, yeah, Dom, it's okay. I also like to ask them though, if I like don't know, right? I was coaching volleyball, so I was more of sport coach, not mental performance coach. That was a completely different role, right? But if you don't know, ask them like, hey, how do you like feedback? How do you want me to talk to you? Do you like being yelled at? And some people are going to be like, yes, I need that. And some people are going to be like, no, I don't take that well at all. It's like, okay, the best coaches know their athletes' personalities and how they best receive feedback. And if you don't know, just ask them. They will so appreciate
that. Yeah. Simple first, right? So Dom, do you have anything else? I know we're coming up close on an hour, Georgia. I don't want to take too much more of your time.
No, she covered just about everything that I have for now. I mean, there's a lot we could talk about. I know we're coming up in the hour, so.
Well, this has been awesome. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. This podcast is, it's built on mindset, champion mindset, and then, finding your way towards that mindset and sharpening it, whatever that looks like for you. So, getting a sports psychologist or someone in your field on was a goal. So it worked out. It's helped me learn a lot just in talking with you for an hour. So I know the people that, the fan base that we have listening and the type of people that listen will take value from it. If people are wanting to work with you or reach out to you, how do they find you?
Yeah, my email is georgia.miller@peaksports.com. And then our website is big too. That's just peaksports.com. And you'll see my bio on there and how to reach out to us.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate your time. For Georgia Miller, Dom Cardone, I'm Tommy Stiles, and we are out of here.